I'm going to go ahead and make an assumption. That being, if you've found your way to this video, you're familiar with Monster Hunter, and more than likely having played at least a couple of the recent entries in the series. So, you love hunting giant monsters with a ridiculous weapon, and then carving off bits of them to make new pants and hats and such, and then doing it all over again, and then doing it all over again, and then doing it all over again, soaking in the gameplay loop that orbits around a highly refined and engaging combat system. Me too. But while Wild Hearts S and Monster Hunter share that glorious core loop, and the devs were obviously deeply inspired by Monster Hunter, Wild Hearts wasn't afraid to carve its own path. So think of it less as a clone, a copycat, a rip-off, and more like Monster Hunter's neurodivergent cousin who shows up with a bunch of crazy gadgets they've been building out of Lego shoelaces and a 3D printer they stripped down for parts, and monsters more inspired by smooshing together bits of nature and gigantic regular animals instead of monsters that look more like westernized dragons and assorted mythological critters and such. Hello again, I am Blunty, and I'm kind of aiming here, with this video, to help some more skeptical Monster Hunter fans open up their minds a little bit and give an opportunity for Wild Hearts S here to impress them. It's launching within a few days of the release of this video. There is a free demo for you to try out on the Nintendo Switch 2. All it's going to cost you is time to give it a go. And in this video, I will almost exclusively be using footage from that Nintendo Switch 2 demo, by the way, so no spoilers for deeper into the game if you're too worried about that. This video should be pretty safe on that. I'm going to spoil one singular monster that is deeper in the game, but for a very good reason. So I'm not going to spoil too much about him, just how he looks. All right? So, yeah. But I want to talk about how Wild Hearts keeps the core of what we all love about Monster Hunter without just becoming an inherently inferior wannabe clone. So, here is how Wild Hearts S brought its own flavor to the monster mashing party. The first, most obvious thing is the Karakuri. It's kinda, sorta, a little bit like the WIREBUG system on Monster Hunter Rise. Love it or hate it, doesn't matter. I'm not talking directly, it doesn't do the same kind of thing, but it sort of mechanically has the same idea. But the Karakuri stuff is way more diverse and interesting in the options it gives you during a fight than WIREBUG ever was. And I was a fan of the WIREBUG. I really enjoyed Rise and the dynamicism that the WIREBUG system allowed, but the Karakuri system is so far beyond that. You see, Wild Hearts lets you build stuff on the fly during a hunt, mid-battle, using a surprisingly intuitive and fast system that becomes second nature faster than I ever expected it to. I thought it was going to be awkward and complex and I'd get stuff wrong all the time. And you still do, you misclick sometimes and you don't build the thing you wanted to build accidentally because you're in a rush or you're panicking or something, but it's shockingly intuitive to build a wide range of stuff. You need to strike high on a flying monster or an especially large monster, or you want to do a big downward smash or slice or whatever, pop up some crates, stack them up to 3 high and launch yourself off the top springboard style. Is the monster steaming up a big, extremely difficult to avoid charge attack that could very nearly one-shot you, if not totally just kill you outright? Well, slap down a wall and give it a concussion and a knockdown. Want to fly through the air like an anime ninja? Springboards! This stuff is just the tip of the iceberg. This is just the stuff you get access to really early in the game, and indeed in the demo, but there is a bunch of other stuff. There's a giant, nearly Wile E. Coyote-style hammer, which is brilliant fun to use, by the way. There's gliding helicopter-type devices you can use to traverse the map and fly over canyons and stuff. There's cannons. There's literal cannons. There's traps and harpoons and tie-down ropes and flashbang grenades the size of fridges. Literal impact bombs you can just lay down in the field and bait the monster into. And that's just the in-battle stuff. There are some kinds of Karakuri builds that are persistent on your map, like once you put them down, they stay there until you pull them apart again, and they're made for use out of battle. So you need to traverse across a large gap in the map. Well, you make your own shortcut with a zipline. Easy. Goes in both directions, up and down. You can make camps, you can make cooking stations, you can make fishing traps, you can make food processors and dryers and fermenters, a bunch of food-related and item farming gadgets. There's just piles and piles of kooky stuff for camps and whatnot. It's actually a really sophisticated camp-building system. But during battle, that's where the Karakuri system adds a highly dynamic, almost puzzle-like element to every fight. There's just nothing in Monster Hunter that lets you control the battlefield in the same ways. Like, traps and barrel bombs and sleep toads and whatnot, slinger ammo, they all seem quaint in comparison to what you can get up to with the Karakuri system. This system alone gives Wild Hearts a clear and defined personality, very separate from Monster Hunter, without ever actually damaging or interfering with or stepping on the toes or whatever allegory you want to use with the core combat that you'll still need to rely on. Like, the core combat is still kind of very pure Monster Hunter-y. Oh, and don't think you know how these weapons works just by looking at them, by the way. The thing you think is a greatsword, yeah, it doesn't feel much like a greatsword in the way you use it. The hammer is very, very different. There's a clutch claw style thing that plays a little bit like insect glaive, but also like dual blades. Don't make any assumptions about the weapons in this game. They feel very different from Monster Hunter, but very engaging all the same. They've got some really fun mechanics tied into each and every different weapon, and they all feel, just like they do in Monster Hunter, very different from one another. The only frustrating thing about the way Wild Hearts does its weapons is some of the weapons are locked behind game progress. You have to get to a certain point to unlock certain weapons, which is annoying because one of my favorite weapons is one of those weapons that's locked behind progress, so I can't use it from the start of the game. Oh well. But when the game had its original release on PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X and PC and whatnot, it had a big failure for a bunch of different reasons I've talked about in other videos. But the game itself, underneath all those issues, the game was always solid, mechanically speaking. As in, the game design itself was really well crafted. This is a game made by people who give a crap. The monsters are fresh feeling and original and a long way from mere copy-paste me-toos of Monster Hunter designs. It would have been so easy just to do a bunch of, dragons and whatnot, like so many other Monster Hunter copycats have tried to do. But no, these guys built monsters around a central lore that itself is just distinct from Monster Hunter, so the monsters couldn't be the same as Monster Hunter's monsters. So nothing in this game comes off as a copycat. Although, it has to be said, Capcom themselves can't make that same stance. One of their own new monsters in Wilds bears a shockingly similar design to one of Wild Hearts' own originals, and Wild Hearts did it first. Which, man, if you got smacked around the first time you faced a Jarakan in Wilds, and he is a bit of a tough fight at first. I mean, he's not exactly a wall monster, but he certainly took me by surprise the first time I faced him. But, yeah, if you thought that fight was a little something, prepare your bones for liquefaction when you meet the OG Lava Gorilla, Lava Back. This big dude has zero chill. And when I say big dude, yeah, I've posted an image here in isolation. He's way bigger than you think he is. But it is a spectacularly fun and challenging fight to master, and it is indeed, I think, one of the wall monsters in this game. Definitely took me a few times to get past him. I got smooshed the first few times. It was awesome. And that brings me to the next point, by the way. If you are one of the Monster Hunter vets who have been lamenting how quote-unquote easy Wilds has felt through a combination of your own higher skill, floor, and experience and the deliberate accessibility of the game design choices that Capcom have made, yeah, worry not. Monster Hunter has definitely picked up pace over the last few versions. Rise is definitely a very high-paced game, and Wilds is not quite as dynamic as Rise, but still faster than World was, and then, just the way the fights flow. But they've got nothing on how furiously unforgiving and yet somehow still fair the fights in Wild Hearts feel. If you take a big hit in Wilds, it still does what Monster Hunter does to you. It still makes sure you know it's your fault you got hit. It's not the game's like being cheap or anything. It's not cheesy. If you get smacked around, you made a mistake. But Wild Hearts S in general is going to feel quicker, more agile, more dynamic, and in some ways more fluid than you might be used to in traditional Monster Hunter games, certainly. You're going to be zipping around fairly nimbly, even with the slower, heavier weapons, thanks in large part to the Karakuri and the mobility they offer up. But just like Monster Hunter, you're still going to need to learn the monster's tells and dodge with precision and care and position yourself correctly and predict where you need to be next to capitalize. You need to know where your openings are, how long those openings are, how much you can get away with, and what you've got time to do. Because if you mess up, you will be punished heavily. And while you'll never need to sharpen in Wild Hearts, and it doesn't rely as heavily on other sort of consumables and stuff, there is still a little bit of micromanagement to handle. There are different foods you can do for different buffs, of course. The heals, in particular, are slow, a sheath your weapon, and they're a slow consume, and you walk while you do it, and you'll need to pick your timing carefully because of all of that. It feels a lot closer to a Souls-like style heal than a modern Monster Hunter one, actually. And all of the monsters, from hour 1 to end game, are fully capable of 2-tapping you, if not one-hitting you if you're in the wrong spot at the big attack time, you know what I mean? If you're sitting there locked down, you're in an attack animation, and you've realized too late, there's no room to dodge out, you're done, mate, gone. It is a lot less forgiving than modern Monster Hunter. And I mentioned this in another recent video about Wild Hearts S. I can't name a Monster Hunter game where the second monster you fight feels like a genuine threat. Like usually it's 3, 4, 5, 6 monsters in a Monster Hunter game before you sort of hit the real threat. The one where you start having to, really start paying attention to what you're doing. Yeah, Wild Hearts does not softball you like that. You're in the poop from minute 1. You got to keep on top of your skills, you got to pay attention, you got to keep on top of your gear progression. And despite the speed and nimbleness, the combat still manages to feel weighty, heavy, thumpy though. Hits feel satisfying and meaty thanks to careful design of hit stops, animation, audio design, visual effects, and camera shake. Take all that in combination, and it feels, properly chunky without losing any fluidity. And just a note on audio design, by the way. I just said the words audio designer, it made me think of this. It's superb all the way throughout the game. For example, even your footsteps sound different depending on what shoes you're wearing. This armor set I'm wearing in this clip, it has those traditional Japanese wooden sandals called gaita. My pronunciation is probably wrong, but you know the ones I mean, right? The ones with 2 little blocks on the bottom. So listen to this. Isn't that neat? That sound of the footsteps only happens in this particular armor because this is the only armor that has those particular shoes. That is just a clue to the amount of attention to detail that has gone on in this game. It is not in any way, a quick and dirty, rushed out the door clone of Monster Hunter. If you really made this, give a crap. So now that we're talking about armor and things, if you like build crafting, oh boy, get ready for the nutty world of weapon trees in Wild Hearts. It is so different to what you might be expecting from a Monster Hunter style game. There is no straight path there. There's no iron tree to this monster tree to this endpoint and it's set progression. You have to craft 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. No. This system instead spiderwebs your way through a sometimes shockingly complicated path to get a very particular custom weapon that you want. You don't have to always spiderweb, you can just go in a straight line if you want. But if you do fully engage with the system, it sits in this way because you can carry forward specific weapon skills and buffs from one weapon to another. So if you want a weapon that's, say, stacked out with critical boosting skills only, that's your core of your build. Well, you're going to need to find a path through the weapon tree that lets you pick up and then stack and carry those skills across to your end point. The exact same weapon could also, through a different path, wind up being a heavy health buffed tank build instead, with skills stacked for survivability and high aggression gameplay instead. The armor has its own separate system, vastly different from what Monster Hunter does and how Monster Hunter does it. You'll be walking down either a human or kimono path, the kimono being this game's word for monsters. And depending on how you mix and match your armor skills and which armor pieces you put together, you might be heavy on the kimono side of the balance, or the human side of the balance, or somewhere in the middle. The core difference between the two extremes tends to be if it's a pure combat skill or a skill tied to the Karakuri system and such. The kimono side favors, for instance, things like pure damage output boosts and things like buffing stamina to keep you powerful, to keep you aggressive. The human side of things has skills that do things like boost your attack and defense if you stay at full health, or automatically gradually recover your celestial thread. This is the gatherable material that you use to summon your Karakuri devices, so having more is always better. That is barely brushing across the surface here. It is a shockingly deep system, and as you'd hope, specializing in certain passives can be very powerful if you build everything towards supporting that, just as they can in Monster Hunter. So build crafting and whatnot is, while very, very different to Monster Hunter, it is potentially just as engaging if that is your jam. If that's something you'd love to sink your teeth into, you will find a lot of meat on the bones here. Oh, and if you've ever complained about how Monster Hunter does co-op story progression, or rather how badly Capcom fails to do that, even though we've been screaming at them for years. Well, Wild Hearts does it really, really well. Just for the record, it's extremely simple, extremely intuitive, and very clear, and you can progress together simultaneously very, very easily. In fact, the entire onboarding and active diegetic kind of tutorializing that happens in the opening hours of the game is done really well here as well. It's a very smooth experience that will teach you all the basics you need in a very clean way, in a very intuitive way, in a very easy to understand way. The game can get very deep and very complicated if you want it to, but the basic stuff it needs to teach you, it does it so much better than Capcom have ever managed to do it. Story and character interactions are also very strong points. The story isn't complex. It's probably more interesting than most Monster Hunter stories, I think. Although Wilds, give it its due. I did really like the story and character stuff in Wilds, but, historically Monster Hunter has not been focused on that stuff. But the stuff here, and the characters, and the writing, and the story, and the progression, and the lore of the world, and the full voice acting, by the way, are all pretty damn top tier for an action RPG style thing of this type. The voice acting in particular is really, really well done. The casting, the direction, the delivery, it's superb stuff. Don't skip through it. Take your time, listen to these characters tell you about their stuff and things. There's some very interesting things going on with these characters, with their writing in the game, their motivations, their goals, their stories, their backstories. Heroes and cowards and idiots and drunks and, well, also, if you're not completely secure in your sexuality, there are a couple of characters in this game that might make you feel weird. Oh, and if you're about to screech something about, oh no, it's woke, this is a woke game. First, you're on the wrong channel for a start, bucko. You idiots aren't welcome here. Secondly, you types won't get past the character creator in this game anyway, because it's body types and not sexes. Femmes can have beards, and wait for it. There's a pronoun selector. From minute one, this game is like kryptonite for those low IQ gooners who shit their pants at the thought of even so much as a dude with eyeliner on or something. The rest of us who just want to let people be people and not throw them in a camp because they're not wearing the right gender typical type of hat or something. The character creator is actually pretty deep. That's what I was trying to get at here. It's a really, really decent character creator. It's not quite as good as the one in Wilds has, which, man, I got real close to a personal lookalike in that one. Closer than any game I've ever tried. I really like the character creator in Wilds. But yeah, the Wild Hearts one is still pretty flexible and powerful and deep. So that's always fun. I think you people that like to finesse your character are going to have a lot of engagement here. Oh, and unlike Capcom, by the way, speaking of fiddling with your character, they don't charge you a microtransaction for a ticket from the DLC store to allow you to change up the look of your character as much as you want, as often as you want. So, that too, Capcom. In fact, doing this stuff, changing up your character, is even tied to an in-game mechanic, because you do it via a Karakuri mirror you can craft and set up in your own little house a few hours into the game or so, around chapter 2 or something if I remember correctly. So it might be a little bit more than a few hours into the game. I don't know, someone who remembers, correct me if I'm wrong on that. But either way, there's a mirror you can unlock and craft and put down in your own little house and use that to change up your character as much as you like, as often as you like, however you like. Anyway, I'm starting to dig a little deeper into specific mechanics and minutiae than I'd intended to for this video. The main point I was trying to drive at while bouncing across a few things here at surface level, and again, everything I've talked about here is pretty much just surface level. Well, the mirror, maybe not so much, but But the game is a lot deeper than this video even can give you any idea about. I just wanted to give you a hint about how Wild Hearts scratches the exact same itch that Monster Hunter gets at, while also being a refreshingly and interestingly thing in its own right at the same time. It's familiar, yep, but also distinct. And the ways in which it is distinct are not just to avoid being sued or something, because it's too close and Capcom's going to come after you. No, everything that's different about this game versus Monster Hunter, it has done very deliberately. It's a very careful choice that it leans into fully and completely, and it's a choice that's been made for a specific purpose, none of which has anything to do with any lawyers. They made the game they wanted to make, because the people that made this game give a shit. So yeah, please don't write it off just because it had a rough launch in its original form, and don't dismiss it out of hand thinking it's just a copycat or a cash grab or whatever other words I've been seeing thrown around from it. It deserves so much more than that. it is so much more than the catastrophically mishandled launch, which I've touched on in other recent videos. I'm not going to dig into again. It's EA's shitty treatment of both the developer and the original player community, because EA was handling the community communication at that time. And oh my god, I want to slap. Like, I'm not even kidding. I just wanted to slap some of these dickheads, the EA employees, just right across their face. A little throat chop. Just shut them up, because they were such dingleberries. We'll just use the word dingleberries. They were dingleberries. Anyway, I really hope that this is a true redemption arc for this game, and what I hope becomes a series in its own right. I want to see this thing go on, because it is engaging, it's fun, it's interesting, it's got a really solid foundation, it's fresh but familiar, and once you sink into it even just a little bit, it becomes very obvious that the people who made this care very much about making a fun game with depth and a unique identity. So for the fourth time, I think, I might have lost count, this is a game that the people who made give a shit about. And it's easy to tell they give a shit, because when you play it, you go, oh, yeah, the people that made this care. I'm glad it's getting a second chance, or the opportunity for a second chance. I guess now it's up to the gamers to see if they let it have a second chance, which is part of what this video is serving, I suppose. So yeah, thanks for watching. Thank you to the patrons. I'm Blunty, and I will catch you next time.
Woman.